Today, the Fiesta Bowl presents the America West Mile Run. Hello everyone, welcome to Central Avenue in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm Marty LaCory along with Tony Revis, and we're here for the America West Mile, an event that's only 5 years old but has become one of the unique athletic experiences in the world. The best milers in the world competing in front of a crowd of over 50,000 people, and it's no surprise that the world's best jump at the chance to compete here. Now, Tony Revis running the mile on a track 4 laps is a relatively modern thing. For hundreds of years, racing was done this way at country fairs and on city streets.
And the athletes really enjoyed this fun experience, but it's more than just fun. Of course, the centerpiece of the Fiesta Bowl is the Florida State-Nebraska football game, and that's an end-of-the-year extravaganza. Now, this America West Mile is more like a kickoff, and it's a kickoff to the American indoor running season. So these athletes, they're here for fun, and they're here for competition, but they're here to see where they stand after just a couple of months of training and not racing. So that makes it a wide-open competition. No reputations really are made. What your credentials were in the past, that doesn't mean anything. This is a wide-open race, and we're looking for maybe perhaps an upset.
Well, all the athletes who are serious about the indoor season try to come to this race. Who are you expecting to see here today?
Well, we've had 4 separate champions in the 4 previous years. All 4 of those gentlemen are back with us this year. They are led by Marcus O'Sullivan from Ireland. He is the reigning world indoor mile champion. He has a best of 3 minutes and 50 seconds in the mile, and he is always getting himself prepared for that indoor circuit, especially this year when there's a $100,000 bonus for a world record. Also, last year's champion, Jeff Atkinson, Palo Alto, California, Stanford graduate, winner of the Olympic trials for the United States in 1988, and a finalist at the Olympic Games in Seoul. Steve Scott, the dominant American miler for the last decade, 12 years. He has won the Mercedes Mile in New York City on the city streets. He is also the fastest American in history at the mile at 3 minutes, 47.69 seconds. And Ray Flynn, he is the outdoor Irish record holder in the mile with a best of 3:49.6. He won this race back in 1986. Those are our 4 main contenders today.
Okay, Tony and I will be back to introduce you to the rest of the field when the start of the America West Mile continues our coverage of this race. We'll be back in just a moment. We're back at the America West Mile Run. A few years ago, the top milers were asked if they would like to come to Phoenix to run a race in front of the crowds that gathered for the sun-kissed Fiesta Bowl parade. And of course, they gave it their full support. 1985 was the first year a mile run was included in Fiesta Bowl activity. On the starting line that year were Sidney Marie, Tom Byers, and Paul Donovan, along with 3 men who were to become stalwarts of the race. Steve Scott, number 1, Marcus O'Sullivan, number 7, and Irishman Ray Flynn, number 3. Sidney Marie was the hot miler back then, and O'Sullivan had yet to emerge as the world indoor champion and a record challenger. Steve Scott had just moved from Phoenix after 5 years, and it was a sweet homecoming for him as he dug deep for the win.
The home people here in Phoenix, where he spent 5 years, and it is Steve Scott. Steve Scott and Marcus O'Sullivan. It will be Steve Scott. Steve Scott, the winner of the first ever Merrill Lynch Fiesta Bowl mile.
We talked earlier with Scott about the strategy for a mile on the road.
The strategy is different in your first race, and it's also different on different surfaces. On an outdoor track, I think that I'd be the guy that would be the favorite. On an indoor track, it'd be Marcus. And on road mile, both Jeff Atkinson and Ray Flynn are very strong. You know, stronger than they would be on the other 2 type of surfaces. So, and in the strategy, it changes again. You run in a straight line. There's not the drafting effect like you will have on a track, indoors or outdoors. Mostly you're running 4 abreast or 5 abreast running down the street. And it's really a matter of adjusting to how far the finish is away and knowing your strengths and your weaknesses and where you are in your training. And the first race of the year is always a tough one because no one is real confident in their abilities unless they've been doing a lot of track work, which I don't think anybody has at this point.
John Walker of New Zealand joined the field in '86, and O'Sullivan was second again, while Ray Flynn won the season opener. We asked Ray about the early season timing of this event.
This is a first race for most of these athletes in months of training, and it's a race where each of them feel that they have a chance of winning. And it's also one where reputations haven't been built in the last few weeks, where there can be an intimidation or one athlete can feel that they have an advantage. I think it makes it far more wide open, and it reflects on the fact that we've had 4 different winners, and each one back here added to new competitors, and nobody has won it twice yet, so it'll be interesting to see the outcome.
In 1987, former winners Steve Scott and Ray Flynn were back. Marcus O'Sullivan, who was second to both of them in the previous races, was on the verge of a monumental indoor season that would establish him as the world's dominant indoor miler. He started it all with a convincing win here. O'Sullivan continues to use this race as a major source of preparation for the battles under the lights.
Tremendous race. It's a habit. It's habit forming. We come here every year. It's the dry weather, the sunny weather in Phoenix, and I think it leads us to kind of reviving ourselves before the indoor season, and it gets us up onto a new level before the indoors kicks off, and that's very important. I think it's important for the mental approach to the whole season, January and February in the indoor season, and it's a must, I think, for a lot of athletes.
When we come back, we'll have a word with last year's winner, Jeff Atkinson.
This road mile is held in conjunction with something else. There's one road mile that I've run in Spain where it's a festival day and there's nobody working, and it's the only thing that's held in the city, and there's a lot of people that show up to watch, but it pales in comparison to the crowd that is attracted to this event. This event is held in conjunction with the Fiesta Bowl parade. The race is held just minutes before the parade starts, so you've got the built-in crowd, and people are there at the finish line. I understand tomorrow there's going to be 5,000 people at the finish stands when we finish the race. So that's something that no other road mile can claim. I mean, we run in New York in front of a handful of people, and in Toronto we run a road mile where I've had parties at my house that had more people than were watching the race. So, you know, it's a lot more exciting as an athlete to run in front of people, as you all know. The athletes get a lot more into it, and they get a better performance out of themselves when they're running in front of people.
The runners will be sent down this mile straight away by our honorary starter this year, Mark Coleman, the Senior Vice President of American West. And Mark, we're certainly happy that America West has taken an interest in running.
Thank you, Marty. It's really our pleasure to be here. This is pretty special for us because we're based in Phoenix. We like to show off the Valley of the Sun, and we have a very active running club at our airline. So it's a lot of fun for us, and obviously gives us some exposure across the country.
Well, it certainly added a lot to the race. Now let's go over to Tony.
Jeff, you came into last year's race off the best season of your career, winning the Olympic trials and then being a finalist at the Olympic Games in Seoul. How did you come into the America West Mile 1989?
I was extremely fit up to about a month ago, and then I sprained my ankle running in the park on an easy run. So I've lost some time, but we'll have to see how it goes today. The important thing is to compete well, as with all races, and hope for the best.
Who do you look to be the main competitors in the race today, and why?
Well, I got to think Marcus is in pretty good shape because he should be going for that $100,000 prize this year on the indoor circuit. Steve seems to be in the best shape of his life as well. So those are the two that. But Padilla is sneaky because in early season he's really quick and he could just cruise along and blow us all away.
In a race which usually attracts 4 or 5 milers who have run under 3:50, this race has yielded few fast times. According to Marcus O'Sullivan, it's partly psychological.
To be quite honest, time should be considered irrelevant. It's nice to see a race that's going to be very competitive, and I think it will be very competitive, primarily from the fact that a lot of athletes will hold back for the first 3 quarters of the race. And this is due because many of the athletes feel it's the kickoff race of the year. They're not quite sure where they're at. They might be in better shape than they realize that they're at, and they might not be in as good a shape as they would hope to be in, but they don't really find out until the last 200 or 300 meters. And unfortunately, it's a race where you finish and you feel, God, I had a lot more left in me than I thought I had, or I didn't realize I was so out of shape. So I think a lot of the athletes race a little bit somewhat conservatively, but on the other hand, I think it leads to a race where it's very competitive because a lot of the athletes athletes are together in the last 200 or 300 meters. And I think from a spectator's point of view, I think that personally, from my own personal point of view, I think that's a little bit more interesting than running for fast times and have everybody strung out all over the place, you know.
We're back at the America West Mile here in Phoenix. The athletes are on the line. First, Marcus O'Sullivan from Ireland. He was our 1987 champion, and he really is today's race favorite, at least according to the athletes. Beside him, Steve Scott from Encinitas, California. He won the race back in 1985. He's the American record holder at the mile. Never count him out of any race he enters. Beside him is Graham Fell. He's from Canada. He is his country's steeplechase record holder, and he's getting himself ready for the upcoming Commonwealth Games in New Zealand. Beside him, our defending champion, Jeff Atkinson from Palo Alto, California, a Stanford graduate, and it'll be tough for him to defend his title. He was injured just a couple of weeks ago. 6'4.5", 145-pound Doug Consiglio, the national record holder at 1,500 meters. Beside him, a local boy from Phoenix, Jeff Smith, an Arizona State graduate. He was third in this competition just last year, looking to make a breakthrough today. Next, we go to Doug Padilla from Orem, Utah, a member of the United States 5,000-meter Olympic team. He has one of racing's finest finishing kicks. He may need it today. There's Ray Flynn from Ireland. He's a sub-350 miler and the Irish record holder, followed by Charles Marsala from Bloomington, Indiana, a 3:37 1,500-meter man. And finally, there's Treg Scott, a 23-year-old right out of Phoenix. He was fourth in the competition back in 1987.
Today, the weather will be cooperating. It's about 50 degrees and the conditions of the wind very calm. And as you think back to your competitive days, the first race of the year, always the most nerve-wracking. They get easier from here on in. I think it's the fear of the unknown.
The gun is up. The 1989 America West Mile is underway. And Marty, on the far right, in the white long sleeves, the red shorts, Arizona State University graduate Treg Scott. He's a 4-minute miler, one of the handful of young runners in the field who'd like to take some bigger name scalps out there today. And right in the middle of the field, in the black outfit, wearing number 6, that's Doug Padilla of Utah, an Olympian at 5,000 meters, one of the most talented guys America's seen in recent years, but he only entered the race late. What's that tell you?
Well, I think the story on Doug is he had a very poor season last year. He went back to Utah, trained hard all fall. At Christmas, he was down around Stanford, did a couple of workouts with Jeff Atkinson, the defending champion, who's back there in last place right now. And Doug said to himself after those workouts, I'm in pretty good shape. I need to find a race. He called up and got in the race. So I think he knows he's ready for a good one.
Up with him in the lead pack, number 21, red top, white shorts, Charles Marsala, University of Indiana standout, also coming off a poor season, looking to rejuvenate himself. The first quarter mile in 63 seconds. Marty, not that fast, but we didn't expect an aggressive early pace.
No, Charlie Marsala's up there controlling the pace. He's an interesting story, too. He took almost all of last year off to work in New York City. He had a job. He's trying to earn enough money to become a full-time athlete so that he can run with these guys week in and week out. So he's got a lot to prove.
The third man in that front row, he's also in a red outfit, number 9. There he is, Graham Fell from Canada, the steeplechase record holder from Canada. He's getting himself ready for late January's Commonwealth Games in Auckland, New Zealand. This is a real test for him. And beside him on the far left are two favorites. All the way on the left, number 2, Marcus O'Sullivan, and in the sunglasses to his inside is Steve Scott. How does it look at this particular point, Marty? Who looks good? They're strung out all over this. You never see 5 across, 10 across on the track.
Well, the benefit is that this is almost like running 100 meters, but it goes on for a mile. Everyone gets to run their own best race. It's tough being out there in the lead. It's got some benefits, but being behind is even worse.
2:07, the halfway split, and it's still the entire field in tight construction going right down the middle of Central Avenue. Treg Scott, number 10 in the lead. Look how tightly bunched they are. Let's go left.
We're going to see one of the slower times in the history of this race.
But a mad dash to the tape.
As they come into this race, it's early season, many of the runners unsure of themselves, but one thing number 2, Marcus O'Sullivan does know is that in the last 100 meters, he certainly should be able to have the best kick. Steve Scott, number 3, would like to start running 300 yards from the finish, and Ray Flynn, who's won this race in the past, number 5, who's now moved his way up to the front, knows that he's really got to be the first one to make his all-out sprint. We'll probably see Ray make a move.
Ray Flynn has been looking around more than the other athletes, and now it's number 2, Marcus O'Sullivan, who is coming from behind Graham Fell. He was running off Graham Fell's shoulder for the middle part of the race, and now O'Sullivan is maintaining himself in that lead position with Doug Padilla, who also has some great speed at his disposal at the end of the competition, right in front as well.
All right, here's where strategy comes in. The runners feel that they can't judge how far it is to the finish on a straightaway race.
We're in the
so
final
they're all
quarter
looking
mile.
At each other to see who starts going first. Remember, number 6, Doug Padilla, has not won this race in the past, and it has been a race that has not been won by the defending champion. So now it's Padilla with Marcus O'Sullivan and number 3, Steve Scott, moving out. So they've all got a clear run. Ray Flynn does not appear to have good position at this point, and Doug Padilla looks to be moving towards an upset.
In the past, Marty, the first man to make a move has won this competition. Padilla made the first move. Scott's coming up on his shoulder. O'Sullivan's made his move, and here comes Ray Flynn. Does Padilla have enough? Or here's Steve Scott at the tape. Steve Scott from Encinitas, California. Looks like the winner in 4 minutes and 5 seconds unofficially.
It certainly seems that Steve Scott, who's run over 100 4-minute miles and has been a top-ranked miler for over a dozen years, still gets a lot of excitement and enjoyment out of a close race and not just running fast times.
Marty, you head down and try to get an interview with Scott where we take a look at the last couple blocks, the last 100, 150 meters of this race. Scott's on the far left of the screen. In the middle, Marcus O'Sullivan. And on the right, Doug Padilla in the black. Padilla in charge from about a quarter mile out. But O'Sullivan said before the competition, the finishing time that they ran really was somewhat irrelevant. And yet, what we saw was a time well over 4 minutes, and yet possibly the most exciting race we're going to see all season. I mean, it doesn't get any closer than this. A ding-dong battle all the way to the wire. Scott just pulling it out in the last, 5-10 yards. And now we take a look at unofficial results for the top 5. And as we do that, I think Marty has corralled Steve Scott down on the infield.
We're with a still breathless Steve Scott. And Steve, you've had a long career, and I've seen a lot of your races, but that was a real scramble there in the last 100 meters.
Oh, it sure was. You know, Doug is a very tough competitor, especially in a slower race. He's always right there, and he's really tough. And I mean, I've been outkicked by Doug in miles before, so I knew that he'd be very tough. And earlier in the race, I thought that I was tying up and lost it, but then we got within 50 yards of the finish, and I felt like, well, make one last effort and maybe you could pull it out, and I was just able to get by him at the finish.
Well, it's interesting that you pointed out, because at the half mile it was about 2:07. You knew it was slow, you knew it was going to be a kicker's race, but you were in the back of the pack. You weren't really set to make a rush at the finish, and then at the last instant it seemed like you found new life. You moved out to the outside and made a run at it.
Well, in years gone by in this race, I've wanted to make a good race out of it, make it fast, and I somewhat sacrificed, my race by having that type of race plan. And today my main objective was to win, and I felt like my speed is pretty good at this point, and I wanted to just leave it to the very end like I usually do, which is usually my best race tactic.
All right, let me bring Doug Padilla in here. Doug, you really came to this race at the last minute. You must have known that you had something up your sleeve. You're usually a guy who stays in the back and then kicks at the end, but you really took an aggressive stance and were out there at the front of the race the whole way.
Well, some of that's due to Fifth Avenue. Running in the Mercedes mile last time, I ended up out of position, and I was never able to get back into it. So here, I wanted to stay as close to the front. I didn't want to lead, but I wanted to try and keep an open lane so that if I felt like it was time to move, I could have a way to get out. So, yeah, I probably, like Steve said, it's a little better to stay back out of the way and relax, but I didn't feel like I had that luxury.
Well, we've all been saying that these road miles have less strategy than the races on the track, but as there's been a few more, we're starting to find out that the tactics here are even more important than they are on the track.
Oh, most definitely. It's much harder to run on the roads because you don't know how far you have to the finish, and what I did today was I marked off at Adams how far that was to finish. It was like 140 yards. So I knew at that point how far I had to go to the finish, and really use that as my marker when to start my last finishing drive.
All right, well, great race for both of you. Good luck on the indoor season. We'll be back with the final results in a moment, so stay with us on the America West Mile. Marty LaCory and Tony Revis back for one final look at the America West Mile. And Tony, when a race comes down to 6 inches at the finish, sometimes you've got to go all the way back to the start and see what little things made a difference. Doug Padilla went out very quickly at the start.
Racing completely against type. And I found interesting in his interview the influence that the Fifth Avenue Mile earlier this year played. We see him every shot. Doug Padilla right in the middle of the road and at the front of the pack. He is always a guy that comes from behind. This is not the Doug Padilla we've known over the years.
Now, when you start in the middle of the pack, you almost have to go out to the lead. Marcus O'Sullivan on the left there and Steve Scott in the second row started out on one end, and they were able to get behind and run in the back because it wasn't too much of a move for them to have to go around. Right here, Doug Padilla had made a big move, and Marcus O'Sullivan, number 2, really worked hard to cover that move. Ray Flynn couldn't handle the pressure, and Steve Scott, like a wily veteran, let them both punch it out, really. And I think after Doug Padilla had expended so much energy on Marcus O'Sullivan that when Steve Scott came up for him, he just didn't have much left. Doug tried to lean for the tape very early, and it was really too early. He was coming back when Steve Scott took like an extra hop and threw himself at the tape. And right now, Steve Scott is down with Mark Coleman and getting the award for this great lunge at the tape.
Yeah, they had to.
On behalf of America West, we want to thank you for joining us in Phoenix for the America West Mile. Terrific run, great finish, just super race.
Oh,
Thanks.
thank you very much. I felt like if a hometown American won the race, you guys might be back next year, so that was incentive for me.
Thanks again.
Thank you very much for your participation as well.
So Steve Scott wins it with a lunge at the tape. Doug Padilla and Ray Flynn running one of their best races in quite a while, and Marcus O'Sullivan has some work to do before the indoor season starts. Jeff Smith in 5th place with a good race. He managed to kick with the big guys. Jeff Atkinson, our winner from last year, finished in 8th place. A recent sprained ankle slowing him down a bit. Well, Tony, one thing we can take from those results, as well as from what we've seen the last couple of years here in the 80s in basketball and in track and field, that the older guys, if they're motivated and if they spend a little more time in the recovery room, they can compete on a very high level.
You know, the two men who are real contenders and made the race, Doug Padilla and Steve Scott, both 33 years old, and you expect them to start getting slower, but both of these guys were motivated, perhaps more than the other athletes in the field. Doug Padilla had a very bad season last year. He needs to rejuvenate himself, and I think that he set his sights on 1990 as his chance to do that. And Steve Scott, of course, lived in Phoenix for 5 years, and so he's sort of a hometown boy and likes to do well in front of people and friends that he's known for a long period of time. The man that I didn't think was going to run as poorly as he did, if you want to call it poorly, was Marcus O'Sullivan, who showed speed, but not enough strength when push came to shove.
Well, he was 90% there. It was that last 30 yards which made the difference in this race. Well, for Tony Revis, I'm Marty LaCory. Thanks for joining us at the America West Mile.
Today's race was presented by the Fiesta Bowl and brought to you by America West Airlines. What we serve